2007 Murano. Got to change the alternator. First thing we're going to do is take the wheel off and block it up. So we got the tire off. Jack under there still, and I've got a floor jack as well for support. Now we're going to pull this panel off right here, have another closer look at to what else we have to take off to get to that alternator. So this is the passenger side of the Murano. Okay, there's the panel. This is what I'm using to take it apart. I popped it out there, and I don't know if you saw that. I popped it out there, and now I'm going to finish here, just like that. Now this clip is still in here, but it doesn't really matter. I can pull that later and put it back in place. So now this is what I have to work with. This right here is the air conditioner, and by the looks of this belt, I guess I'm going to put a new belt on there because it is just about toast. It's all cracked. Okay, the next thing I'm working on here is that idler pulley right there. Gonna loosen off that nut. It's a 14 mil. And then on top of that, there's another tensioner, and it is I don't know if you're gonna be able to see in there or not. I can't even see in there. Anyway, that's where it is, and the size of that is a 9/16. So more than likely a 14 mil as well. I'm using a 9 on it. And that's where it goes. So you loosen that off, and that'll release your wheel. But what I'm also going to do is take that wheel right off, because I got to take the bracket off as well. And then I'm going to replace that belt as well, because it's wore out. Anyway, more later. Okay, another thing I'm doing here, I don't know if I'm holding this camera right or not. It's probably going to be upside down, backwards and everything. But anyway, another thing I'm doing here to get pressure on the nut is I'm taking another wrench and locking it in so that I can actually use it to pull, because it's such a tight spot, and you can't, if you want to save the skin on your knuckles and everything, you use this, and sometimes you lose the skin anyway. So a little bit more. This 12 mil and a strong bar to get those bolts up in there. Go way up in there. Managed to get it on there just enough to loosen it, and then I'm using my 1/4 inch drive, and I got a universal joint on it, and that worked way up in the top, but I had to get the rest of it out with my fingers. So that's how I managed to get this one out. It's a real pain, but it came out eventually. Make sure you oil everything really well. Okay, so this is what this thing looks like. This is the tensioner right here, and this is the pulley. So you get this spacer in here that goes on there, and then in behind this you got another washer kind of thing that goes on next, and then the wheel goes on top of that, and then another washer on top of that, and the nut, and that's how it all goes back together, just like that. And those 3 bolts are all the same size, so you don't have to worry about one being longer than another. And that's what it looks like when it's out. Okay, so I'm popping all the plastic off the top here. all these pieces, and down in there is a little tube that goes all the way along here, and that just pops out of there like that. And we got a little bit of space there. We may be able to work on that top part of the alternator, because there's supposed to be a bolt down in there, and I got the wiring that I got to disconnect too, so this will give me some space to work. I pulled that wire out of there. It's on top as well. You can't hardly see anything down in there. Okay, so I actually had to take some fluid out of the rad. I did that right here. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's just a Phillips screwdriver, and you just loosen it and catch about a couple of liters. And then I just took and turned the fan sideways. So this piece here, this side here, actually goes down there. So when I put it back in again, I'm just going to turn it like that. And I may take it right out of here, because I think I got the space to take it out. And that gives me more space down in here to work. Okay, so I took that out. Pulled it right out of there, nice and easy. This piece right here just went by the fan blade as the blade was turning. Over here now I have space to actually work on pulling wires now. That thing under that cup is a nut for the live wire. I gotta pop that out of there. And then I think there's a nut in behind for the, or not a nut, a bolt in behind. Not sure if you see anything. I can't see nothing from here, but I'm gonna have a look at the video there and see if I can see where that bolt is in there. Somewhere in there, I would think. And then I got a wire in there that I got to pull out as well. Okay. Okay, so now what I did was had to unplug this wire from the AC pump down there. Had to wiggle the alternator around this pipe here, across here, this little bracket here. I put a pair of vice grips on it, bent it forward, or well, bent it back out of the way. Motor support, I have the motor supported with a jack and a block. And I pulled the bolts out and I moved the motor support towards the back of the car. So it gave me enough room to slide the alternator down through here. So what I ended up doing was pulling the battery box, and it worked perfect. I don't have to mess with the frame or the air conditioning system, just in case you happen to break a line or two or whatever. Then you're getting into a lot more work in the air conditioning part. And now all I got to do is just slide it back into place, bolt it up, and put everything back together. And all I did was take 2 liters of antifreeze out. That's not so bad. I bent the pipe up here. Now we're on our way to putting it back together again. Okay, a really good idea also is to put a piece of cardboard against the radiator, so that when you're dragging the alternator across there, you don't get no dings in your rad or holes. Okay, so the alternator's in place. I actually tightened up that nut, or the bolt on the top here. Probably can't see it. It's in there somewhere. Tighten that top bolt up, just snugged it up, so that when I pushed it back against the engine, it stayed in place. And then I was able to actually get the bolt in there. I don't know if you can see it or not. Go underneath here. And to get the bolt up in there, because I can't get my hands in there, I actually used this thing here. I held on to the bolt with this. Let me see where you're at there. It's a little spring loaded. And I hooked onto the bolt and actually shoved it into the alternator first, right in there. And now it's pretty much snug. I can't do any more with that. So what I'm going to get is a piece of bar that's long enough to reach up behind, and then I'm going to tap it with a hammer, or maybe just pry against something and pry it back into place. Let's see what happens here. There's also a piece of steel sticking out behind the bolt there. Make sure that's against the engine. That locks in behind the alternator and keeps the bolt from turning when you're tightening it on the other side. So what I got here is a piece of bar. I'm going to try and put it up behind here and maybe just tap it into place. My camera's not very good. My camera hand and my hammering hand. Okay, I'm gonna set it in place, and then we'll show you some more. Okay, so I got it in place. I don't know if you can see it. Oh yeah, there it is right there. It's in place. And what I did, I loosened the bolt up on the top. A little too snug. And then I moved the alternator up and down, back and forth, and I got it in there. So now you can see that the bolt is actually sticking through right here. We'll put a nut on it there now, tighten that up, and then tighten the other bolt on the top, and then put our adjuster on and our belt, and then the engine should be ready to go. And just put everything else all back together again. So, get the wire hooked up here for the alternator. Goes in there. I got the clip in the back as well, and then I got to hook up my wire for my air conditioning unit, which is down here. Had to unhook that also to take out the alternator. Okay, the next thing we're going to put on is this tensioner here. Make sure it's working properly, cleaned out, oiled, and make sure that you put all these pieces back together in the right place again. Okay, so we got it all back together again. Well, not all, but working on it. And the idler pulley is back in place. It's up here. Make sure that the groove in behind is actually locked into the groove that slides up and down. When you tighten this belt tensioner down, make sure your pulley is loose. And if it's not loose, you won't be able to tighten it. It won't move. And after you have your belt tensioner all tightened up so that you've got enough play in your belt, then you can tighten this nut here that's on the wheel, the pulley. And then there's also under here, I had to unhook this piece of pipe right here that came off the bottom of the fan, so make sure you put that back on again. What else was there? Yeah, put your pipe back on, put your fluid back in, your liter or two that you took out, and if you can't get it all in there, put it in the reservoir over there. The black cap, I believe, is the one. Yes, don't put it in the blue one. It'll look really bad going on your windshield. Battery's all back in, the box is all bolted back in. I had to take this fuse box off. It comes off pretty easy. Just pop that off the battery box, set it up out of the way, and there's two bolts, one there, one there. Make sure that's in place when you put your fans back in place. And then we're going to just stuff everything back on here and give you a little bit more of a view when it's finished. So far that's it. Okay, so we got the top plastic all back together again. I've actually put in self-tapping screws because all the plastic pieces are all broke. So the self-tapping screws work just as good. Hold it in place, keep it from rattling. And now we're going to do the same thing on the bottom here. We'll put this all back together. Okay, so the piece that goes underneath the vehicle here is all cracked. So what I did was I took a 1/4 inch bit, drilled a bunch of holes both sides of the cracks and zipped it all together. So all I'm going to do is now is just start cutting all these little pieces off. And what it looks like on the good side, it looks like this, but at least it's not going to rattle in the wind now. Okay, here we are underneath the vehicle, and I got the front piece of plastic all up. I actually took some self-tapping screws and screwed everything back in because all the clips broke. It won't last very long anyway, and these screws will help hold it in place. And I zip tied all this so that it stays together a little better. And now we're going to go over to the side here, and we got some work to do in here. A piece of plastic and a wheel, and then we'll see what happens. Okay, so we got the covers back in place, plastic's all on. I just used screws, screw plastic to plastic, and some of them are self-threading screws that go into the metal. They work pretty good. And now we're putting the tire on, and we should be done and on the road. All back together and gone.